The other day, ChatGPT released some important upgrades to their flagship ChatGPT model. Now, there hasn't been much news about it, but I believe the changes are truly monumental. And by the end of the video, not only will you know why that is, but you'll also have a practical idea of how you can put these important changes into your apps to make them a lot more powerful and user-friendly. Now, before we get started, as always, all the resources, all the apps that I talk about on my channel are available to view and or clone from my Patreon page. And you can learn more about our incredible Patreon community via the link in the description below the video. All right, so this is OpenAI's blog article with their important model updates. And it says here, function calling and other API updates. We're announcing updates including more steerable API models, function calling capabilities, longer context, and lower prices. So if you scroll down a little bit, the first major change that they're announcing is called function calling. And it says here, developers can now describe functions and have the model intelligently choose to output a JSON object containing arguments to call those functions. This is a new way to more reliably connect GPT's capabilities with external tools and APIs. So this is a very, very important change. And not only will I tell you what it does so that you guys can understand, but I'm going to be showing you a practical proof of concept app that actually puts this into practice and does something that you really couldn't do before. So stay tuned for that. The other main change is that GPT 3.5 Turbo now has a token limit of 16,000, which is 4 times the previous limit. Now, GPT-4 has a 32,000 token limit, but this model is by invitation only, and so you have to be on the waiting list, and so it's not available to everyone. I've been on the waiting list for a while, and I still don't have access to it, whereas this model is available to everyone right now, and this is a big deal. And so a little bit later in the video, I'm going to explain to you how it works, and I'm going to be showing you an amazing proof of concept app that you definitely must see. So right now, let's cover function calling and why that is a big deal. And then a little bit later in the video, we're going to be talking about the increased token limit of the GPT 3.5 model. Function calling allows developers to more reliably get structured data back from the model. For example, developers can create chatbots that answer questions by calling external tools. They can convert natural language into API calls or database queries, and they can also extract structured data from text. So these are just some of the examples. This is not the entire list because we're just scratching the top of the surface. There's so many things that you can do with it. So let me show you an example of why this is a big deal. So here we are looking at a sample request to GPT 3.5. So I'm using the user role, which is the role where the user is sending different requests. And I have a simple request, find out the weather for San Francisco. So let's go ahead and execute this request right now. And let's take a look at the response. And it's telling us to find out the current weather in San Francisco, you can check a reliable weather website or use a weather app on your smartphone. So we did not get a response. And this is a variation of the answer that you might get. And it goes something like, as an AI language model, I don't have access to the internet, I don't have access to current events, etc., etc. So depending on when you run it, you might get a variation of this answer. And so why are we not getting the answer that we need? Because if we ask it something about like geography or science or anything else, we're going to get an answer, right? But if you ask it, for weather or, the current price of Bitcoin or like, how many dollars are in €1 or something like that, you're not going to get an answer. And that is because large language models are awesome when it comes to data that they've been trained on, but they don't have access to the internet. At least the API doesn't. And so as a result, it can't really give you data that's right now. It can't give you, data having to do with current events. So I cannot ask it for weather in, Latin America or weather in Asia. It doesn't have access to the internet. And so this is the main problem. But fortunately, that problem has now been solved with function calling. And so if I modify this request by adding this block here, it's going to give me a different answer. So let me execute this again so that you can see. So now we went ahead and we executed this new request, and we're getting a different response, not a slightly different response, a completely different response. And what it's telling us is that it's giving us something funny. It's telling us, well, it's telling us this function call. It's giving us a name, which is, some get current weather or something like that. And it's giving us arguments, and it's giving us location, San Francisco. And so what's happening now is that in addition to our request, where we are, asking it for some information, in this case, we want the current weather, we're also specifying a structure for a function. So this function is called get current weather. We have a description, but we also have parameters. So this function accepts location. So you see it says location, city and state, and we also have a unit parameter, but required is only location. So we don't really, we can send a unit, which is if we want it in Celsius or Fahrenheit, but it's not required. But what is required is location. And so what's happening right now is that this model understands that, we're looking for weather, and it also understands that we gave it a function that could be the go-to function if we're asking for weather. And as a result, it generated a function call for us. So let me show you another way of how this works. And so if you think about the standard GPT flow, you have your app, and your app is sending requests and you get a response. But if you ask something having to do with current events, such as what is the weather, or convert currencies, or, what's the price of Bitcoin today, it's going to tell you, I don't know, right? It's going to be more diplomatic, obviously, but it's the same thing. I don't know, go find out for yourself. But what function calling allows us to do is what we have here is we have, the ability to not only send those regular requests, having to do with data, having to do with information it already knows, such as, think of some names for blog articles, or think of a company name for, software company that makes this, etc., or like, what's the capital of, country X. We're going to get that. But if you send it something that it typically may not know, it's going to take a look at the rest of your request, and if it finds a function, it's going to return to you the function formatted with the arguments, right? So what happens here is that, you have your regular requests and you get your regular responses. But if you include the fact that, yes, you have a function, and, take this function into account, it's going to come back to you with a function that has been formatted with the argument. So here, the nice thing about it is returning the name of the function that we specified here. But another really cool thing that it's doing is that it's taking the San Francisco here and it's returning it as an argument, right? So it realized that not only do we want weather, but we also specified the city. So it took that city out and it created like a kind of an argument that's been formatted as a JSON object. Really, really powerful, as you're going to see in a second when I show you a proof of concept app. And so what happens here is we get this function back with the arguments, and then it's our job to see that it came back with a function. And so it's our job to, do whatever we need to do and, get the data, right? So in this case, we might actually, send a request to some kind of a weather API here, get back the weather, and then we can let the user know, okay, this is the weather, because, the user asked for it. Or we can send it as an additional message to ChatGPT, so that the weather information that we got from an external API is part of the context. And this is all going to make sense when I show you the proof of concept. And so this is very, very powerful if you understand what problems it's meant to solve. And the problem that it actually aims to solve is a big problem, right? And this is the situation where you're looking for data that, the LLM, the large language model, cannot, furnish you that data. It doesn't know that data, right? So this is an interesting solution to a big problem, okay? And so now let me show you a proof of concept app that I built that's going to make everything a lot clearer and show you how you can leverage this crucial functionality inside of your apps. All right, so here we are inside of Flutterflow, and I built a very, very simple app that shows you the power of this function calling feature that was recently launched. So let me go ahead and run this app. All right, so here's the app, and we have an input here where the user can enter their query. So they can ask the LLM, ChatGPT, anything that they want. So for instance, I can say like, what is the capital of France? Okay, so let me go ahead and send this request. And I get a response. The capital of France is Paris. But let's say you ask something that, typically LLM would not know, such as what is the weather? So I can say like, what is the weather in Paris? Okay, so I'm going to ask the question. And I get back a response, 28 degrees Celsius. I can change that. What is the weather in New York? Let's see what the weather should be lower. 21 degrees Celsius. So how does this work? How does ChatGPT know that? Well, first, we're asking about the weather. And second, where to get this weather information? Well, let me show you. Now, the way this app works is that when the user asks a question, we make an API call. So we have this button here, it triggers a workflow, and we have a backend call. So we have a backend call, and we send the question as one of the variables in the input. And for the backend call, we are sending a request to this URL. So this is the URL, and we're sending a body, the question here. And this URL here points to an instance that hosts a very, very powerful no-code tool called N8N. And this is the tool right here. And I actually had a very, very comprehensive video about N8N, and you can see the whole video right there. But a quick summary is that N8N allows you to build complex automations 10 times faster without fighting APIs. So if we're logging into my own instance right here, you can see that I have a very, very simple workflow. And so I have a webhook that accepts requests. So anytime we send a request to that URL, it accepts the request here. And then it executes this OpenAI request. And this OpenAI request looks exactly like this request here. And so what's happening is we send this request, and then we have a condition. And the condition checks, does the model come back to us that we need to execute a function? If so, then we're going to make another HTTP request to this weather API. And I'm using this service right here at weatherapi.com. They have a very, very generous free plan. And so you can sign up for them, and you're going to have weather forecasts around the world, and you can use it inside of your apps. And so here it detects, did ChatGPT come back to us and say we need to execute a function? If it did, then what we're going to do is we're going to execute this API call and then respond to the user. On the other hand, if it detects that we're not talking about the weather, meaning that we're sending just a regular request that, ChatGPT knows about, then we're just going to respond to this webhook here. And so as a result, not only can we ask ChatGPT normal queries that, people are accustomed to, such as what is the capital of this, or think of a cool name for this, but we can also ask it special queries having to do with current events, or queries that are specific to our own use cases. And all we need to do is we need to send that specific function declaration here, and then we need to check, does ChatGPT want us to execute this function because it doesn't know the answer, or it knows the answer, so we don't need to execute any other function. This is what this module is doing. So, if the answer is yes, we're going to execute this API call, get the data, and just send the user the data. If no, we're just going to send the response back to the user. And as a result, we can build very, very flexible apps that are going to be ready for any kind of query that the user is going to throw at it. The second major model upgrade I want to talk about now is this 16,000 token window. And this is 4 times the context length of the previous model, this GPT 3.5 Turbo. And 16,000 context means the model can now support 20 pages of text in a single request. And this is pretty self-explanatory. It really means that you could cram more data, up to 4 times more data, in a single request. And so now let me show you a proof of concept app that I'm sure most of you are gonna appreciate. And so here's a quick app that I built. This app allows you to upload a PDF and then ask any question about something that you want to know about the context in that PDF. So I went ahead and prepared a sample PDF, and this is a standard lease agreement. And this is the type of contract that somebody who is looking to rent an apartment would sign with their landlord. So there's a lot of information here. And it's a good size PDF. It's not a huge PDF. It's also not a small PDF. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send this PDF, and then we're going to ask various questions in order to clarify some of the terms and conditions that are in this PDF. So maybe things like pets, smoking, early termination, things like that. All right, so here's the app. And the first thing we need to do is we need to upload the PDF. We're going to click here. We're going to select our PDF, and now it's uploading. When it finishes uploading, the image is going to change, and that way you know that the file has been uploaded successfully. Now all you need to do is type in the question that you want to ask. For example, we can type, what is the pet policy? Ask a question, wait for the response to come in. So here it says, according to the contract, pets are not allowed on the premises or in the premises common areas. However, the contract does mention that animals that are necessary for individuals with etc., etc. So that is the response. We can also ask, what is the late policy? Let's wait. According to the contract, if the rent is not paid by or on the due date, the landlord may assess a late fee. The late fee is equal to 5% of the rent per occurrence for each month's payment. So there you have it. And you can continue, ask it more and more questions, but let me show you how this app is built so that you can build an app like this one if you so choose. So here's the main screen here, and what I'm doing here is I have a stack that has two images under it. And so the nice thing with stacks in Flutterflow is that you can change what you want to show underneath the stack. You obviously are not going to be showing both of them at the same time. So I have this initial image here, right? So if we go in here, I have this initial image and I have this uploaded. So if I disable this one, you can see this initial, and that is when uploaded file is set or not empty. That's the second image. And the initial is the opposite, when file is on set and empty. And so when you click on this, you have a flow, and that simply uploads the file to Firebase. And so once it uploads to Firebase, it's going to automatically have access to the URL of the file. And so all the files are stored here in storage. So if I go into storage, and then I go into my account here, users, my UID uploads, and if we scroll down, you can see these are the PDFs right here. And so as soon as it finishes uploading, you're going to have access to the URL where it was stored. And then the user is going to ask a question, then press this button. And so when they press this button, it's going to execute a workflow. So it's doing a backend API call, and it's going to send the question and the URL of the PDF. And then it's going to get back a result, and it's going to update the widget state, and the widget here is going to display the answer. But the bulk of the work is being done here. And this is another N8N workflow that I created. Very, very simple workflow. And essentially what it's doing is it has a webhook which listens for incoming requests. And specifically, it's listening for two things. It's listening for question and PDF URL here. Next is going to make an HTTP request, and this is where it's going to download that, that file at that URL. And this is going to be binary data. Next, we have read PDF, which takes that PDF that was read here, this binary data, turns it into text. And so if you click here, you can see that now we have the text of the PDF, whereas here it's all binary, right? It's just URL, question, and it's just binary data. This is the data here, whereas here it's actually text. We can actually read it. It's all nicely formatted. Once we have the text, what we're going to do is we're going to make a call to OpenAI, and I have the prompt here. You are a lawyer who specializes in residential lease contracts. I'm going to send you a text of a contract to analyze, and then I send the whole contract the entire contract here. And then in the second message, this is a system message, this is a user message, I am sending in the question that the user may have sent. So for instance, in this case, what is a late fee? What is the late fee? This thing processes and we get a response back. So then I, come back with a JSON object here. We have an answer, and then we have this message content that we get back from this OpenAI. And so very, very similar flow. We are using N8N for both of these modules. And like I said earlier in the video, you want to make sure you watch one of my previous videos where I talked about N8N. I talked about why it's a nice tool, why it's free, how to set it up, and how to use it. And once you watch that video, all of this is going to make a lot more sense. But this is an amazing tool for creating amazing workflows. Now, if you guys are interested in testing some of these amazing AI model upgrades, then you definitely want to view and or clone my apps. And also you might be interested in viewing and or cloning my workflows. And all of that is going to be available from my Patreon page. And so if you're looking to get ahead when it comes to no code, you want to build amazing apps, you don't want to learn code, you don't want to write any code, you just want to build the apps and maybe build a career or a contract for somebody, or maybe build your own apps for your own projects, then you definitely owe it to yourself to check out our amazing Patreon community and consider becoming a member. And you can learn more about it via the link in the description below this video.